had a panel discussion and they're part of it. And Nicola cooked a meal. It was one of the best chilies I've ever had. So their chili recipe is there, cornbread, and anyway. So I thought, let's try and have them here and learning about what we might do differently, like they say, to save our environment. So, great. Yep.
I got it. All right. Thank you, Susan. We are so excited to be here. We've given this talk now to, with all of you, like 1,001 through 1,020 people. So we're super excited and honored to see you. We'll introduce ourselves in just a minute, but I just want to kick off with a couple of things. So as Susan mentioned, this talk is about how we can't solve the climate crisis without changing how we eat. But the way I'd like to kick off is with a challenge question, just to get people thinking a little bit. So if you were to weigh all of the mammals on the planet, what percentage of their weight would belong to wild mammals? Any guesses?
20%.
20%, right? That seems like a good guess.
40.
40%?
Whales.
Whales are big.
They weigh a lot.
Right? Yeah. So, unfortunately, the answer is just 4%. So humans make up about 1/3 of all of the mammal mass on the planet, and our livestock makes up almost 2/3. So that leaves just 4% for wild mammals. But you're absolutely right that the whales weigh a lot. So when you cut out the ocean mammals, we're down to just 2% of all land mammals being wild. And it's a similar story for birds. Over 70% of all the avian biomass on the planet is farmed poultry. So it's our meat and dairy habit that is gobbling up land, causing the extinction of wild animals, contributing to climate change, and squandering resources. In the US, half of all of our land is dedicated to animal agriculture. It's our food habits that are a major contributor to climate change and species extinction. So, a little bit about us. My name is Anna Larson. I live in Minneapolis. I'm a member of multiple climate organizations. I'm also the mom of 2 teenagers, and I work in the business world. And I'm also an animal lover. And ever since I was 13, I've been a vegetarian. And about 15 years ago, I became completely plant-based, which means I stopped eating dairy and eggs as well. And since then, I started doing research on our food system and its impact on the world that we live in. And I was shocked by what I learned, because I was thinking, I'm an environmentalist, I care about the climate. Why didn't I know about these things? So this talk is my way of sharing some of what I've learned.
Thanks, Anna. Hi everyone, I'm Nicola Philpott. Thanks to Susan for inviting us to speak today. You can probably tell from my accent that I'm from the UK originally. I moved to New York City 27 years ago to work in scientific research, and then I've gradually made my way further west, and we settled in Eden Prairie about 3 years ago.
Nice.
I've been a climate activist for about 10 years. And in that time I've taken a lot of climate actions that I'll talk about later. But what I found is one of the cheapest, easiest and most effective climate actions that I've taken is to eat less meat. And if it also aligned with my values. When I found out that it takes 4 times as much land to feed a person that eats meat versus a person that eats only plants, it was pretty clear that I should transition to plant-rich eating. And if many of us made that switch away from animal products towards more plants, it would free up a lot of land. We'd be able to plant more trees, reforest, rewild, and increase our biodiversity. So what we're going to do this afternoon is Anna's going to talk about the connection between what we eat and the climate and environment. And then I'm going to talk about how I transitioned from eating meat every day to eating all plants.
Great, thanks, Nicola. So this talk is about fighting climate change, and I'm sure some of you are already doing things to help with that fight. So maybe you're driving an electric vehicle, maybe you shop for clothes at a thrift store, maybe you have an induction stove. Those are all good things, and we need to be doing all of them. And in this talk, we're going to make the case for why you should become a reducitarian. That is, you should eat less animal products, a lot less, to help fight climate change. And we aren't talking about Meatless Monday, because that's not going to cut it. So you may have heard of a British medical journal called The Lancet. It's the equivalent of the Journal of the American Medical Association. It's a respected, thoroughly peer-reviewed medical journal. And several years ago, they commissioned a report to determine how humans should be eating for healthy bodies, because they're a medical journal, and a healthy planet. And that's called the Eat Lancet Report. And what they determined is that Americans are eating over 6 times our fair share of meat for a healthy planet. So that's why I say that Meatless Mondays won't cut it. And instead we'll have to flip it to Meat Eat Monday and only eat meat one day a week. So you don't have to change your life and become vegan. Reducing your meat and dairy consumption and leaving the occasional animal-based food in your diet is a huge help. So I'm not trying to take away your bacon or your cheese Danish or whatever it is that you really love. All I'm saying is keep the animal foods that you really love in your diet and try swapping out the ones that you're just eating out of habit. Treat meat as a treat. So maybe that chicken breast on your salad that you don't really think about, you just always order it that way, try it with chickpeas instead. So now let's start by talking about the climate impact of our diet. So that is its greenhouse gas impact. So while we have rightly focused the climate fight on reducing fossil fuel use, it turns out that fossil fuels are only 2/3 of our problem. That still leaves 1/3 that's caused by how we eat. And I only learned this recently, and it really surprised me, so let me say that again. 1/3 of climate change is caused by what we eat. So within that 1/3, more than half of that is caused by animal agriculture. So it's really important, and it makes a big impact if we do cut back on our use of animal foods. So curbing fossil fuel use without changing how we eat just won't get us to where we need to be. All right, so it's time for another challenge question. If you compare the amount of carbon dioxide released for each pound used, how carbon intensive is a pound of coal compared to a pound of beef? Does anybody want to guess? And you're not
Probably
supposed to. Sorry, what's that?
Probably the meat.
Meat is worse, yeah, beef is worse. Yeah, how much worse? Is it about the same?
Is it a percentage number? Is it just a number? I mean, what is the
5
answer?
times as much.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Well, it turns out a pound
40
of
times,
beef
wow.
is 40 times worse than burning a pound of coal. And it's not just about beef. A pound of shrimp costs us 10 times as much carbon as coal. And cheese is 9 times, and pork and chicken are 4 or 5 times. So can you imagine that? Your family's chicken dinner, which feels pretty clean and virtuous, it's the equivalent of burning 5 or 10 pounds of dirty coal. And by comparison, a pound of dried peas, which is another great protein source, produces just 1/3 the emissions of coal. So if you're taking steps to reduce your personal carbon footprint, eating much less meat and dairy should be high on your list of actions. So please reduce your flights and switch to an electric vehicle if it's in your budget. And for goodness sake, eat fewer animal products. And another point worth remembering is that if you live with other people, switching your whole household to reducitarian will have 2 or 3 times this impact, and that really adds up. And now let's move on from climate change and carbon dioxide emissions and discuss other ways that animal agriculture is damaging the earth. All right, another question. What percentage of all the grains grown in the US do you think are used for direct human consumption? Any guesses? 10%. Yeah.
60.
60%.
5%.
5%. See, we just don't know. Nobody talks about things like this. Well, the first guess was right. It is just about 10% of all the grains that we grow in the US that are actually eaten by people. Most of the grains we grow are used for animal feed. So those amber waves of grain,
I
they're
didn't
for
understand the question.
government-subsidized chicken feed. If we stopped eating so many animals, we could grow a lot less grain and be able to return that excess farmland to nature. And natural land can sequester far more carbon than intensely farmed land. And goodness knows we need to be sequestering carbon. And then on top of this, the monocultures and associated chemicals used to cultivate the enormous amounts of animal feed we need are hurting our planet in other ways. So among other things, it's leading to a decline in our insect populations. So since 1990, our insect levels have declined 70%. And now let's talk about deforestation. So you won't be surprised to learn that cattle ranching is the biggest cause of deforestation in the Amazon. 75% of Brazil's deforestation is caused by cattle ranching. And this meat gets exported all over the world. But in the US, big agriculture has made it illegal to require a country of origin label on meat, so you won't know if you're buying meat from deforested land. But in the US, we import over 1 billion pounds of beef annually from Brazil. So chances are good that if you know someone who eats beef, you know someone who's contributed to the destruction of the Amazon. And when we cut down those trees, we aren't just hurting our climate, we're also risking the extinction of thousands of animal species. All right, there are 2 challenge questions left, so you can take a deep breath, and you're not supposed to know the answer. So let's talk about water usage. Beef uses a lot of water. How many daily showers would equal 1/4 pound hamburger? Any guesses?
100.
100, right? That seems like a good guess. Thank you. Fortunately, it's not quite that bad, but it's still pretty bad. You could shower every day for 6 weeks to equal the water that's needed to produce a 1/4 pound hamburger. And that's not even a big hamburger by American standards. Make it a double, add a couple of slices of cheese, put a little special sauce on there, and you're approaching 6 months of showers. And I should point out, it's not that farm animals are incredibly thirsty. Instead, a lot of the water that's used to raise cattle is actually used for the feed crops. So you can see, like in this picture, a lot of times that the feed crops are raised in areas that need to be heavily irrigated, and that's where a lot of the water goes. Half of all of the water that's used to support an American's lifestyle is used for meat and dairy. All right, so now let's zoom into what's going on in Minnesota to talk about water pollution, or water pollution, as I like to call it. So in Minnesota, we have about 5 million people and 50 million farm animals, And those animals are mostly in CAFOs, or confined animal feeding operations. Those are intensive factory farms. So we have 2 million cattle and 9 million pigs and lots of chickens and turkeys. And a cow makes 25 times the waste of a human. And a pig makes 10 times the waste of a human. In Minnesota, our farm animals create as much waste as almost 100 million people. And have you ever heard of a sewer for animal waste? No, that's not a thing. Instead, that waste gets stored in lagoons, like the purple ponds in this picture, and then it gets sprayed on nearby farm fields. But the land can't absorb such an intense amount of nutrients, and the excess ends up running off into rivers and streams, and also going below ground and polluting the water table. So here in Minnesota, the scale of factory farms is such that within a 2-mile radius of some historic family farms, as much waste is produced by the confined farm animals as all the people in St. Paul. So, and that's just in a 2-mile radius of some family farms. And all of that animal waste, it's disposed of without sewers and treatment plants. And it's, yeah.
I was just reading, I can't remember where, but they're wanting a permit to have 18,000 more dairy cows.
Right.
And they already got like 8,000 or something, but they want to increase it. that
Yeah,
much.
in western Minnesota. Yeah, so that's the equivalent of St. Paul. I've done the math already. That's the equivalent of all the people in St. Paul, like all of their excrement just on this farm and without a sewer. It's, yes, it should not be allowed. And it's not just Minnesota. So in Iowa, 2/3 of the lakes and streams and rivers are impaired from all of this animal waste. So in some lakes in Iowa, you can't go kayaking because the water splashing on your arms causes skin infections. And then I just learned this recently. Iowa has the 2nd highest rate of cancer of all the states in the US. And everything seems to be pointing to the excess nitrogen because that comes from all of the factory farms and the intensive farming that then needs to happen to support the factory farms. So all of this nitrogen ends up building up in their drinking water, and then it aggravates the cancer. And then moving on to Michigan, one family realized that the factory farms within just a 3-mile radius of where they were living produced as much waste in a day as the city of Chicago. And so those are just some of our neighboring states, but this is happening all across the US. All right, so this is the last challenge question. And we're gonna move from land animals to sea animals. So we are emptying our oceans at an alarming rate. What portion of large ocean fish do we have today compared to 100 years ago? Any guesses?
2%?
2%. Yeah, that seems like a good guess, right? Thankfully, things aren't that dire, but they're still pretty bad. So we have just 1/3 of the large ocean fish today that we had 100 years ago. And if you're thinking, oh, 1/3, that's not so bad. I want you to imagine being in a stadium you're at a show, it's sold out, and it's vibrant and lively, every seat is taken, and then 2/3 of the people disappear. So now your nearest neighbor is 3 seats down, and that's a pretty sad and lonely place to be. That is the state of our oceans today. There's also the issue of ocean pollution, and you've probably heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. 80% of all the stuff that makes up that Great Pacific Garbage Patch is made up of commercial fishing gear and other stuff from aquaculture as well. So the point is, you can't avoid damaging the earth by switching your protein consumption from land animals to sea animals. So there you have it. We've made our case for why you need to eat a lot less animal-based food. I have not seen a single credible climate scientist who says, yeah, we can keep eating as much meat as we always have. The earth can handle it. That study doesn't exist. And I hope you're now thinking about changes that you can make to your own diet to make it more earth-friendly. And if you're like many people, this feels like a big ask. You might be wondering if you can negotiate this a little bit. You know, how about if I just... So, let's go into that. What if I just eat grass-fed meat and dairy? I need to tell you, there just isn't enough land on the planet to feed our current appetite for meat and dairy if this is how we raise it. If all American beef were raised using grass-fed methods, it would take more land than we have in the entire United States. And that's just for beef. The math for switching to regenerative farming, but not changing the quantity we eat, just doesn't work out. And I should say, regenerative agriculture does hold some promise for sequestering carbon, but, and this is a big but, the animals raised on the typical regenerative farm actually produce more climate warming gases than that farm sequesters. So those farms are a net negative from a climate perspective. Project Drawdown has said that restoring ecosystems and rewilding land has a much larger carbon storage potential than regenerative agriculture. So when you eat meat, please do get it from a regenerative farm, but make sure you reduce your animal product consumption by a lot. Please understand that eating regeneratively farmed or grass-fed meat and dairy doesn't give you a free pass to keep eating animal products at the rate that Americans are accustomed to. What about if I go vegetarian? Eliminating meat but keeping dairy in the picture certainly helps. But remember, the cows are a big emitter of methane. In Minnesota, for example, 90% of our methane emissions come from cattle. And when we're looking at, and Nicola and I were just looking at this over the weekend, when we look at the data of how Minnesota is doing on greenhouse gas emissions, it's our dairy industry that's causing our state's emissions to go up. So while our energy generation is getting cleaner, unfortunately we've now got more animals grazing and belching more, so it's a net negative. Plus, there are the water and poop issues that we've already discussed. It takes 630 gallons of water to produce 1 gallon of milk. And to help you picture that, imagine the Fauché Tower in downtown Minneapolis. And I know it's not a super tall skyscraper by today's standards, but still, you wouldn't want to have to climb up all those stairs to the top. So 631 gallon jugs of water stacked one on top of the other would be far taller than the Fauché Tower. That is how much water is needed to produce just 1 gallon of milk. So if your morning just wouldn't be complete without a little cream in your coffee, don't sweat that little bit of dairy. But just understand that cutting out meat but adding in more cheese and yogurt is of limited climate benefit. So it's important to remember, eating fewer animal products doesn't have to be all or nothing. Going reducitarian is just fine. So many respected scientists have published studies saying that we're eating way too much meat and dairy for a healthy planet. We all need to cut back on our animal product consumption, way more than just meatless Monday. Instead, we need to shoot for meaty Mondays, 1 day a week of eating meat. And now I'll hand over to Nicola, who will lead a discussion about how you can start eating more plants.
Thank you, Anna. So when I first became alarmed about the climate crisis, I went out and I bought a share in my local community solar garden. And that provides all the electricity for my home. And then I went to DC to advocate for effective climate legislation. And I also organised a solar array at my kids' elementary school. And I went vegan. And then since then I've bought an electric vehicle, an induction stove and a heat pump to heat and cool my home. And we should all do as many of these things as we can. But the cheapest, easiest, and one of the most effective climate actions that I've found is to eat less meat. So, despite what Anna said, I did start with Meatless Mondays. And I looked at the food that I was already making and made some simple switches. So one of those things was a chicken curry. And instead of making it with chicken, I continued to make it with chickpeas or tofu or vegetables instead. And that was so straightforward that every Monday night we're having some kind of a chickpea curry. It increased and evolved to also include a mixed bean chili on Thursdays and a tofu or a vegetable stir fry on Saturdays. And so with these three simple switches, my family have halved the amount of meat that we're eating. Because I make a lot of food, I freeze some down, we eat some the next day. But we don't live in isolation. We have family and friends that come over for dinner. In the summer, they'll come over for a grill out, and we all make things like Impossible burgers, Beyond sausages, lots of grilled vegetables, potato salad, fruit salad, this usual kind of stuff. But everything is plant-based, and everyone really likes the food, even the carnivores in my family. Also, so my kids are teenagers now, and teenagers famously eat a lot. So it's really important that I make food that they really like. So I make things like vegan shepherd's pie, lentil sloppy joes, vegan lasagna. I've got a vegan Wellington recipe, black bean burritos, curried tofu, things like that, minestrone. And so I brought some of those recipes along today. So you're welcome to take as many as you want, or you can photograph them and keep them on your phone. I also included the recipe book or the website where I got those recipes, so you can explore yourself, look at those websites and find your own favourites. So having said that, initially I made some simple switches to eat less meat and increase the plants in our diet. It's really worth looking at what vegan chefs are doing, because they have magical ways of making things tasty and delicious. And so these are some of my favourite and Anna's favourite cookbooks. I found it useful to, instead of thinking about meat as the centrepiece of the meal and vegetables as kind of secondary around that centrepiece, like a meat and potatoes meal, I make lots of food from around the world. So lots of stews and casseroles and stir fries, curries, pasta bakes, things like that. These kind of one-pot meals. And those kinds of meals, sometimes they don't contain any meat in the first place, but if they do, it's very easy to remove that meat and switch it for some sort of a legume. It can be a fake meat product that you can get in the store right now, or just beans or peas or tofu, seitan, things like that. And you can do so without sacrificing any of the flavour. So speaking about these meat alternatives, like either the fake meats or just legumes like lentils, peas, beans, tofu, things like that, they're meat alternatives because they're high in protein. But it turns out we don't need a lot of protein for a healthy diet. We just need 0.36 grams per pound of our body weight. So that's about 50 grams or 2 ounces of protein per day. It's really not very much. And the amount of protein that I eat and that my kids eat isn't something I worry about, because I know that there's protein in all the plants that we eat. And as long as we're eating a variety of fruits, vegetables and grains, we're getting all the amino acids that we need for a healthy diet. Something we might all want to think a little bit more about is the amount of fibre that we're eating, because more than 90% of us aren't eating enough fibre for a healthy diet. And fibre is only in plants, it's not in any animal product. So if we want to increase the fibre, we've got to eat more veg. So my reason for transitioning to plant-rich eating has changed over time. It started off being about the environment and climate, and then it became more about ethical and social justice reasons. And then a couple of years ago, my dad was diagnosed with cardiovascular disease. And so now I'm really enthusiastic about the health benefits. And it's really reassuring for me to know that there is no cholesterol in plants. Cholesterol is made in the liver of animals. So we're all making cholesterol. But it's reassuring to know that I can eat as many plants as I want and I will not be consuming any more cholesterol. Okay, so I want to talk about community because it's much easier to make changes in your life if you're surrounded by people that are doing the same thing or that have done it before. And so when I moved here 3 years ago, I started organising monthly potlucks at my local brewery. And that brewery is Unmapped Brewing Company in Minnetonka. It's not too far away. And you're all welcome to attend. The next one is June 11th, 6:30 p.m. I actually reserved the whole of Base Camp Coffee Shop next door to the brewery. That coffee shop is closed in the evenings. So you enter through the brewery and then everyone brings a dish of food. The food is all plant-based. But if you're new to plant-based eating or you're curious about it, it's a great opportunity for you to come along and try some plant-based food. You do not have to be vegan to come along, but all the food is plant-based. And it's a very relaxed, sociable environment. You can get a drink if you want. So the next ones are June 11th and July 16th. I also want to suggest that you organise your own plant-based potlucks here. Maybe once or twice, once every month or once every couple of months, you get together, you share some food that you've liked, you share some recipes, and build your own community around plant-based eating. Okay, so a couple of years ago, I set up a collaboration with Simpson Housing Services in Minneapolis, and Simpsons is a shelter for people experiencing homelessness. And every month we go there and we make a plant-based meal. And this program has become so popular that it's expanded from once a month to now 3 times a month. And actually the resident chef there understands the connection between food and climate, and so she has designated all Friday lunchtimes completely plant-based, even when we're not there to cook them. And so the people that come along to help in the kitchen, they're not just vegans. There are environmentalists that are curious to learn more about plant-based cooking. There are students that want some volunteer hours, and there are people that just love cooking. So if you'd like to come along and help us in the kitchen, we're there most Fridays. Just let me know. You can get my email at the end of the presentation or just chat to me afterwards. So what you find when you're cooking for a lot of people, these lunches are for about 40 people, is that there are lots of dietary issues, dietary allergies, intolerances and preferences. And so you have a choice. You can make lots of different meals for lots of different dietary issues, or you can make a universal meal and that universal meal that everyone can eat is always plant-based. I should say that when you come and cook in the kitchen, you serve the food, and then you can sit down and eat the food along with the guests. So that's a bonus. It's all about building community. This is my last slide, so I want to talk about empowering youth. So according to Project Drawdown, one of the most effective climate actions that we can take is transition to plant-rich eating. And many young people, including my teenagers, are enthusiastic to do this. They can't afford an electric vehicle. They don't have a house to put solar panels on. And so plant-rich eating is one of the things that they can do to fight climate change. It's really important to me as the parent of teenagers that we encourage our youth to take these climate actions. And it's important to me as a climate activist that we support the youth that are taking climate action, because if they have a positive experience with their first climate action, then hopefully they will take more climate action in the future. Okay, now I'm going to hand back to Anna, and she's going to talk about how you can be an ally.
Great, thank you, Nicola. So this isn't just about you and your personal consumption. We need to rapidly transition to a world where eating meat and dairy 2 or 3 times a day is not the norm. So here are some things you can do beyond your own kitchen. Talk to people about why you're reducing your consumption of animal products. Share some of the information from this presentation that you found compelling. Just like other aspects of fighting climate change or social justice, talking to others about the problems in our world and the things that we can do to help brings them into public consciousness and opens the door for change to occur. Let your elected representatives know that this issue matters to you and lend your voice to the campaigns of others. So speak up about that giant dairy farm in western Minnesota. Let our elected representatives know that you're not okay with that. Big agriculture receives billions in subsidies each year, and you can bet that they're fighting hard to keep that government money flowing. So sign those petitions and write those letters. Support plant-based initiatives for school lunches, for hospital meals, in your church or your office. You don't have to do it all, but advocate in the places that matter to you, and then support others who are leading the charge elsewhere. And finally, order plant-based menu options when you go out to restaurants. Restaurants and our dining companions need to know about the choices we're making and why. And a nice thing you may discover is that many people you already know may be making these changes too. There are many reasons to switch to a plant-rich diet. Planetary health, your own personal health, and the ethics of how farm animals and farm workers are treated. And these are just a few suggestions to get you started if you are interested in learning more. Eating more plants is not controversial. There is not a doctor in the world who will tell you that you can eat too many plants. And there's not an environmentalist in the world who will tell you that we're growing too many plants for human consumption. That's not a thing. So the next time you're planning your dinner or you're at the grocery store shopping for the week, I challenge you to include some meatless, fully plant-based meals in your plan. Start with a single step, but start. So now, we'd like to hear from you. What questions do you have for us? Maybe health, maybe climate, or maybe share your own, what you're already doing. We'd love to hear about that too. Yeah,
You use the term induction stove.
yes.
Clarify what by it is a standard electric stove an induction stove?
What a
No.
great question. No, it's not. Do you want to take this
You
on?
can
You've
go
got
to
a
the
big one. I
TIFs
just
and
don't
go
know.
see,
What?
the TIFs have an induction stove.
You know, we'll come.
We do.
And they do too.
Oh, good. So some of you already
Some,
know.
yeah, some
You can
people have the
demonstrate
choices.
because it boils water in seconds, doesn't it? And you have to have iron
In the
in
pots.
pots
Yes.
to.
Yeah,
Right,
it sounds like you really want to say
Well,
that.
I think people with pacemakers can't have an induction. I wanted to get one. Oh, I don't have a pacemaker or anything, but that's something to consider too. Because we had a friend that had a pacemaker and they had to change out their everything.
Huh. I've never heard
They
of
had
that.
an induction oven and they were trying to give it to us and it didn't fit in our kitchen, unfortunately.
Oh my goodness.
I mean,
I don't know that.
maybe that's changing, but, yeah, I wanted one, because people I know that have them love them.
Yes, I love one.
Still haven't said what an induction
Does it just
stove
use
is.
less energy?
It
per
uses less
heat
energy.
transfer?
Yes.
Is that,
It's a
Yeah.
heat
It's
transfer thing.
Yeah, well,
Look it up.
I'll just back up for a second. So first of all, it lets you get away from fossil fuels. So, so you're not cooking with gas, you're cooking with electricity.
Right.
But then it's far more efficient than the
Electric.
than like the standard electric with the
Yeah.
coils that heat up,
Yeah.
just because you're not wasting all that electricity from the resistance that heats up the coils. Instead, you're transferring the energy directly into the water or the
And even more of the heating, of the cooling down.
Yes.
because that's a huge deal with the induction, is the cooling down, to my understanding.
Yeah, no, that's
So,
exactly
yeah.
right, yeah. But in terms of percent, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure Google could tell you.
So I wanted to speak to the school lunches, because I've been an old lunch lady for a long time.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of the old lunch ladies, and this is just not something I think that older people always know and understand. So we had started several years ago, we do a limited time offer once a month, and we do one meat-based and one plant-based. And we've been really surprised at the number of kids who not only take and enjoy the plant-based, but tell us stories about the things that they eat at home and the ways that they know plant-based, and the whole Gen Z and Gen Alpha kids that we're feeding in the schools right now are much more in tune with this, which I think is a really good thing. And they must be, some of them seeing that at home, some of them seeing that it's a big thing on TikTok so I love hearing the stories from the kids when we serve the plant-based and how they know about it. And I think it's helping some of our staff, our older staff, to understand, because we got a lot of pushback at the beginning. Oh, the kids won't eat that. And we said, let's give it a try like we always do, and they've been very surprised.
What school is this?
Oh, any schools. I mean, we have schools in 20 states.
Oh,
And so I work with the management company, and so we have hundreds of schools.
yeah.
And we're feeding, and I mean, in school lunches, if we can do a little bit of this in school lunches, there are more school lunches than there are of all fast food meals combined. It's a huge audience to be able to target. So,
That's really great to hear. Wow.
so that may be something like with you guys too, to be able to influence in some ways, because
Yes.
these are kids that are learning and growing, and that they can take in some of this information too.
Yeah, and the message that I'm hearing too is that kids are very accepting of it.
Yeah.
Like they already know.
They
this.
know it, yeah.
That's great. I love that story.
I just wanted to promote that last Friday of this month is another Great Bowl luncheon.
Very
So,
exciting.
there's-
Yeah. Doing that.
Yeah, there's so much. It's so easy to eat plant-based if you're having a grain bowl.
So I brought along this magazine, Minnesota Veg Living. It's the current issue. Anna and I both have articles in this, so you're welcome to take. I think we've already got like three left. So,
All right.
and then also I made this list of vegan alternatives, because people are always saying, what do you use instead of butter, or what do you use instead of what plant-based milks do you like? And so I just made my own list of favourites. So that's that. If you want to take one of those.
You had it on the slide, but I don't think it was said, one of the alternative milks that we can use in the schools without a special diet request is the soy milk, because it is nutritionally equivalent to cow's milk, which
Yeah.
I think people are worried when they go to plant-based milks about losing some of those nutrients that they, think that and that people do need. And you have to get it from different sources. You can get it from plant sources, but a lot of people get it from milk, so the soy is a nice alternative with that.
And soy is grown here in Minnesota, so it's local too.
So that's kind of good.
Yeah, I just wondered what your rebuttal would be to all the current trends in, like cottage cheese sales.
Oh, yeah.
Off the charts,
Yep.
and people are just trying. I mean, and there's recommendations for this as you age. For your muscle health and everything, that you supplement your protein. So, what would you say to that? I mean, because you had that statistic of what 46 grams of protein.
And
And
can I?
older,
Yeah, you
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah, so it's true. I think it's true what you're hearing, that as we age, our bodies are less efficient at digesting protein and using it. So we do need to up our protein intake, but it doesn't have to be animal protein. And in fact, there's all kinds of reasons to make it not animal protein. So it's without breaking a sweat, without working too hard and eating weird supplements, you can absolutely eat the right amount of protein, even for our older bodies. And so for sure you can use a protein supplement if you want, but you don't need to. Just habits like sprinkling some hemp seeds on your oatmeal in the morning, or adding an extra scoop of beans or tofu to your grain bowl would be easy ways to just up your protein. Does that And if you wanna fight back some more, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I don't know, it just,
Yeah.
I think people are just going for the cottage cheese, I mean.
Yeah. It's not funny.
Because that's like, it's not me, but, you know, it's,
You're funny.
Animal
They're
rights.
making all this
Yeah,
stuff out of
yeah,
it.
yeah,
So,
yeah, and
kinda,
cottage cheese is definitely having a moment. It's,
It is having a moment. Yeah,
I don't
Good or
know
bad?
about the efficiency of
I don't think it's good or
electric
bad,
versus
it's
induction,
just
and
like
it's not a
recipes
big
with
deal.
it and
Induction is
different
about
things.
10% more efficient.
really, only
So-
that?
If you have an electric stove and not an induction, don't feel too bad.
Okay.
Oh, that's super interesting to know, I didn't realize it was such
Yeah,
a
it
small
is, I mean,
difference.
it's much better than,
The issue is the people who have used gas stoves want that quickness
yeah.
that you can
Ah,
get with
yes.
induction.
Yes.
And so if you're trying to get people off using fossil fuels and using
That works
electric,
better.
but then you have to make sure that you're making your electricity in a good way too.
Yes. Thank you, that's a great point.
Yeah.
I was going to just comment, while you were speaking, I was trying to have the vision of, okay, well, how can this work worldwide and reduce or create the solutions quick enough
Mhm.
for solutions to all these different issues? So do either of you have a vision? I mean, because you've presented that, so to speak, but I still am like,
Yeah, but how do we do it?
yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
you know, I don't have all the answers, I always have
Oh,
thoughts.
well, my immediate thought is to reduce the subsidies that we're giving to factory farms, that would be a start, and give it to small farms instead. What do you
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. Frankly, we spend far too much cropland growing corn for ethanol too, which we also don't need, and that's another subsidized crop, and it can go to ethanol, it can go to animal feed. Then, yeah, the subsidies, so you as a school lunch person knows that, a lot of the food that we feed to our kids, it's kind of the surplus, it's surplus food, but it's maybe not the healthiest food. So I think prioritizing for our children and for other people who are receiving food aid, prioritizing health over calories would be another way to do that.
It just seems bigger than
Yeah.
I can,
Yeah,
Me too.
it's a bigger problem
yeah, yeah.
than anybody's maybe addressing in a way that looks like a solution
Yeah.
fully.
Yeah, and I think there's not one silver bullet solution.
Yeah.
It's a patchwork of lots
Yeah.
of different things. So Nicola's absolutely right that reducing the subsidies, eliminating the subsidies for meat and dairy would be good. I think there's specific farm policies that put all kinds of marginal land into use that shouldn't be. That would be a way to, without dramatically changing our actual output, it would allow us to transition some of these lands back to more natural states. And those are just a couple of things, but smarter people than me have thought through this more.
But also people are doing this around the world. We're not the only people
Yeah.
right here in Minnesota doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
there is a move towards plant-based eating throughout the world. So, we don't need to feel like we're the only people doing it.
That's right. And actually, that reminds me, we were at a talk and somebody was telling us in New Zealand, they eliminated all animal product subsidies. And it wasn't like a super smooth transition, but they're there now and they're still going. So they've done it. I know that Denmark is working to reduce the number of animals in their country, farm animals
Yes,
in their
Denmark
country.
has stopped advertising meat products.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that's a big step.
And they're working, and then they're working with farmers too to reduce their herd size. So there's policies that we can look to. Yeah, we don't have to figure it out from scratch.
So what do you think about Kennedy flipping the pyramid
Oh.
and saying eat more meat, in America? So how are we gonna, there's people who are like, oh, no sheep or meat, and then some people, that's,
everywhere are going, oh no, more saturated fat is not what we need. Yeah.
The word lives.
Right?
We're a mess.
All right, the question is purely
In his brain.
curiosity, but I'd like each of you to answer. When was the last time you had a steak?
Steak.
50 years ago? I don't know.
Years, 2 years ago?
No, 50 years ago.
50.
Like, I've been a vegetarian since I was a kid.
Oh, I just wondered, how
I may
about
have
you?
had 15 years ago.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yesterday. And tonight.
I'll tell you that there's some great alternatives. I don't know if it's still in the stores, but there was a product called Meaty. It's made from mycelium, which is mushroom, like it's like mushroom. It's a fungus, and it's super delicious. Like you wouldn't think it's a steak, but you would think it's a really delicious, satisfying food in its own right that you can slice with a knife.
People love the herbivore butcher.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you feel about that? Some people are opposed to things that are like seem like meat but aren't meat, as opposed to, all just things that are plants. But from a nutritional standpoint, as a dietitian, I'm not a dietitian, but my degree's in dietetics, that getting all the amino acids that you need, and there are plant sources that provide that, but you have to be careful with that as a vegan. I mean, as you guys know, that not all plant sources are complete proteins, and so you could be missing them without soy or tempeh or, I mean, you can get them in chia seeds and hemp seeds, but you have to eat an awful lot. Chia, you can do the puddings and things, but, so I worry about people sometimes understanding that protein sources and having a good variety of protein sources. And I think a lot of those fake meats, if you will, are usually aren't they made with soy and things like that,
Soy and pea proteins.
and pea
sometimes wheat
proteins, yeah,
Yeah.
so.
Have you ever heard of Worthington Foods in Columbus, Ohio?
Mm-mm.
There it is right there. They've been manufacturing a artificial vegetarian chicken product
Oh, yeah.
since I was in college.
Oh, wow. So they're really into it.
Long
That was
time
a long
ago.
time.
I did not say that.
Yeah.
So they're the
You know though,
trailblazers.
Judy, I think none of us are probably gonna go completely vegan or vegetarian.
No, I'm not.
Those of us that
Yeah.
eat some meat, so
Yeah.
I don't know that we'd need to worry about
No,
that.
no.
And so, your presentation was really pretty, I kept hoping you'd have something on an upward, because it was a pretty down thing. Yeah, eye-opening, maybe that's a better way to put it, and and I don't think if we all did it, that we'd make a difference in climate change at all, to tell you the truth. Doesn't mean it's not healthier to do it, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be coming and trying to educate everybody little by little. I know that grassroots is how it's done, but it's for you to fight against those big companies is what you're trying to do, and I don't know how we do that. That's a tough one.
Culture change, it starts.
It is, yeah, it is.
Well, Michelle Obama sure tried, when she did that vegetable garden,
Yeah.
and then it got mowed over and cemented.
But our fruits and vegetables in the schools remain, so we can,
Thank God for
we
that.
can be grateful to that. I speak about that every time someone says it in a derogatory way. Brought a lot of goodness into school meals.
I just read in the paper today that the budget for this year says that they reduced from 850 million to 111 million the amount of dollars that would be given to farmers to experiment with things, which is I think you touched on that, and it isn't being passed in Congress, so at least they're standing up a little bit, but And we should be going above that 850 million, not worrying about going so far below. Yeah, it's
It's a tall order.
It is a tall order right now.
I think, did you
Oh,
want to
well,
say?
I just was gonna, mention, I remember reading an article in the Star Tribune probably 1 or 2 years ago about this pig farmer in central Minnesota that, I don't know, he changed from hog because of all of the pollution and the complaints about the odors and stuff, to farming mushrooms.
Yeah.
Did you hear about that?
There's an
And-
organisation called Transfarmation that helps farmers do that.
Yeah.
Often it's from chicken farms to mushroom farms,
Right.
because the setup that they have is similar, so it's not, doesn't take a huge
Yeah,
effort to do
but
that.
he was like thriving,
Yeah.
and, you know, just really making more money.
Yes, I read that too.
Read Ebony, different ones. I was just gonna say though, you know, when you mentioned, your source of recipes from around the world, it made me wonder, have you done studies on the proportion
It's good
of,
for us to hear it.
of this, root cause of causing all of the, you know, carbon emissions and stuff from farming? Would it be like associated with a westernized, cultures? I mean, because India, you know, traditional in India, like 50 years ago, before the boom in their economy, of course they didn't eat beef, most of them, the Hindus, but, you know, basically, vegetarian people anyway, right? And so, isn't most of this pollution coming from, South
Us.
America with their big beef farms and the US and,
Yeah,
I'm
so-
guessing Canada?
Yeah, so the greenhouse gases related to animal
Right,
agriculture, they mainly come from ruminants, so, you know, cows and sheep and goats, and cows are the biggest one. But, so that's kind of the belches, and that's a big part of the climate impact. But then there's all the land that we use to grow the food that we feed to the animals, and that's around the world, you know, that whether you're eating chicken or you're eating pork or you're eating beef, like almost all those animals are not grazing, they're almost all fed grains that have been intensely farmed and then harvested. And so that way of growing is damaging to the planet because it damages the soil, so then the soil releases their carbon. And then adding the fertilizers, making the fertilizers requires, it's nitrous oxide, which is a different greenhouse gas, but super potent. And so that's in the fertilizer that is super awful for the climate as well.
Melanie, when we were in Indonesia and we went to several different islands, and the first island was the first time I'd seen, and there were a lot of rice paddies, and they talked about how they were, how they did it, and then each ensuing island, there was a lot of land that was given up to rice paddies. And as we experienced the food in those places, a lot of rice was being eaten, and chickpeas, a lot of chickpeas. So I think you're right that the Western world, I think, has probably gravitated, has added to that, the problem more, yeah.
Yeah, so the more meat you have in your diet, the worse it is for the climate.
I was just gonna say that the reason I knew to write letters about the big agriculture, the dairy farm thing, is through Sierra Club. Because both of you mentioned that you volunteer, so I think paying attention to things that are happening, that you can write to, legislatures, particularly Minnesota, I think it probably has a bigger impact than writing nationally. But, and then the other thing that I read, and I don't remember any of the numbers, but a study where foods now have less nutrition in them than they had 30 years ago. So they study an individual carrot or something like that, and they're 29% less nutritious than they were because the soils are so depleted.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know the stats, but I've heard similar.
I made those numbers up.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. All right, well, thank you
Well, thank you for
all.
coming.
Thank you.